Gig Gab, episode 491 for Monday, July 21st, National Junk Food Day, 2025. Greetings, folks, and welcome to Gig Gab, the show by, for, and about working musicians. Here, as usual, in Durham, New Hampshire, I'm Dave Hamilton. And today, we're going to dive deep into the world of music rights, metadata, and the dollars that too many musicians wind up leaving on the table. And as my guest co-host today is someone who's not just talking about it, he's been building the systems to fix it. Our guest co-host today is Dae Bogan, and I hope I'm pronouncing your last name correctly, Dae. You're the head of third-party partnerships at the MLC, which has also been an ongoing sponsor here of the show. In addition to that, Dae, you're a serial entrepreneur, educator, and champion for independent musicians. From founding and selling music tech startups to teaching the business of music at UCLA, Dae's mission has always been clear: empower creators to actually get paid. So, yeah, this episode's going to include some business and marketing talk because, you know what? It turns out that being a working musician involves business and marketing. Dae, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no, I've been looking forward to this conversation. This is going to be fun. The place I'd like to start, and anybody that's been listening for even just more than a few weeks has heard me share the sponsorship segments about the MLC, and we talk about how it allows musicians to get paid for their mechanical royalties and all that. I think a lot of folks don't understand what mechanical royalties actually are or why they matter. So can we break down the basics and how you tackle this kind of black box of things?
Yes, absolutely. Well, it's interesting because mechanical royalties have been around for 120 plus years.
Okay.
But unlike most organizations, or unlike most countries in the developed world, the United States was pretty much the only country that did not have a dedicated mechanical rights organization. So that is why many songwriters have been unfamiliar with digital mechanical royalties unless they were on top of education.
Sure.
So let's go back 100 plus years, really.
Okay.
And mechanical royalties.
And I kind of want to stop when you said that there's the U.S. didn't have an organization to do this. We know about ASCAP and CSAC and BMI. Those are performing rights organizations, right? PROs, is that right? Okay, just wanted to articulate that for anybody that's listening and saying, wait, I thought I had ASCAP on my side or BMI on my side or whatever. So, yeah, okay, great.
Right. So basically, it really goes back to the early 1900s when I believe it's 1906 or 1907. I have so many dates in my head, so forgive me if I'm 1 year off. But the early 1900s, we had the first Copyright Act that included musical works as federally protected. And that established a mechanical royalty rate. And that was about 2 cents. Now, this mechanical royalty rate, it's important to understand why it's called mechanical, right? The reason why it's called mechanical royalties is that musical works were mechanically reproduced in piano rolls that were then distributed to bars and saloons.
Yeah.
So this was and also mechanically reproduced in sheet music. So that is why it was called mechanical.
That's why we call this so. Okay, so mechanical
royalty, whereas performance royalty with ASCAP and BMI, for example, and CSAC, was because of the performance of these musical works.
Got it. Okay, so mechanical comes from is the recording that the musicians made and now is being reproduced in various ways, whereas the performance right is someone, that musician or someone else performing that song that they have rights to in a live setting.
So the mechanical has to do with the musical work, the lyrics and the melody, not the recording.
Not the recording. Okay, thank you for correcting me. Yeah.
Right. So you get, for example, you get a mechanical royalty because the musical work, the actual melody, the notations, and so forth, was reproduced in these 10 cylinder sort of piano rolls.
Sure.
And that each of these reproduced piano rolls was basically the medium for distributing this musical work. Those will then be distributed out to saloons and piano players. So it's called mechanical royalties because you were mechanically reproducing a musical work, either in things such as a piano roll or a sheet music. There's a mechanical process to reproduce a sheet.
Right.
So it had nothing to do with the sound recording itself.
Got it.
Sound recording came way later in 1976. So it's 70 years later. So 1906 was the copyright where there was a mechanical royalty established of 2 cents. And this, there was no organization that was created to go along with, to coincide with collecting these royalties. It was simply establishing a federal copyright for musical works and establishing a compulsory royalty rate, a compulsory mechanical royalty rate.
And compulsory means that once you have submitted the copyright for your the music, the melody, the lyrics, all of that, once that's submitted, now someone else has the right to reproduce that. They just they can only do it, or there is now this compulsory rate that they must pay every time they play the mechanical version of it. Is that right?
Correct. So it means that once you've published your work, anyone can reproduce your work without direct permission, as long as they follow the guidance of the requirements of the Copyright Act.
So you've already given that permission by publishing your work effectively.
It's not that you're giving the permission; it's you're forfeiting permission.
Got it. Got it. Yes. That makes sense. Yeah.
Yes. So once you've published, and publication is a specific action, but once you've published the work, then anyone can reproduce and distribute their version of it, as long as they've do so within the boundaries of the Copyright Act. So that, for example, I can't change the nature and feel of your song, and I can't, for example, take a love song and make it into an angry hate song, because that would be a derivative work, and that's a different copyright.
Got it.
So you have to maintain the integrity of the original work. You can change pronouns, like if someone wrote a song about a man and then someone else recorded it about a woman, that's fine, as long as the lyrics are the same. But the compulsory element of it is that you don't have to get direct permission from the songwriters to do the work. Now, you do need to still know who the songwriters and copyright owners are to meet the requirements of reporting the usage to those copyright owners and to pay them. And that was the biggest problem, is music users using works and not knowing how to identify the copyright owners, and therefore being able to pay them. This has been always a problem it wasn't as big of a problem for a while, because music was publishers representing songwriters, and there was a dedicated company to contact for sheet music. And eventually, when we got into phono records, vinyl and 8-track and CDs and so forth, cassettes. There was record labels dealing with publishers. There was middlemen like HFA that facilitated mechanical agreements for recordings. Where the issue really exploded, or where the gaps that already existed in the mechanical licensing process exploded, was the digital era, because the digital era basically opened the floodgates for musicians to be able to create music and upload it without going through the traditional record label publisher sort of gatekeeper ecosystem that would normally facilitate the mechanical royalty process. So when the 90s, well, early 2000s, exploded with digital uploads, that allowed any musician, whether they had a publisher or not, to be able, or a label or not, to be able to upload their music and begin to earn mechanical royalties, but without the sort of the institutions at play that normally dealt with handling mechanical royalties.
Sure. Okay. So, in the old days, I'll call them, the system sort of took care of itself because everybody was involved with someone that was aware of how to do this, and the digital age, of course, meant you could publish things without being involved with anyone, and that here and here we are. Yeah.
Right. So yeah, the digital era really exploded this. I guess they're not loopholes, but the gaps that were already there, which was, we did not have a society in the United States that was dedicated to mechanical royalties for all songwriters and publishers. We had you had publishers who handled their own catalog, and then you had some organization agencies like Harry Fox Agency, for example, that represented certain publishers, but there was no one-stop organization like you have ASCAP and BMI that handles, and CSEC that handled the performing royalties for almost 100 years.
Right. No, that makes sense. So the idea of having someone out there looking sort of holistically at this was what was needed, and that's what the MLC does, right? That's the gap.
Exactly. So that's the gap. So but now the MLC was born out of the passing of the Music Modernization Act, and that was in 2018. And this was a 3-part legislation, which these were 3 different bills. Originally, they were being lobbied as three separate bills, and they were bundled up into a 3-part package called the Music and Work Modernization Act. And Title I of that was what created the MLC, and it addresses the mechanical royalties for digital audio streaming only, not for physical mechanicals. So, for example, we don't handle mechanical royalties for CDs or vinyl or cassettes or ringtones, only streaming and downloads.
Got it. Because those are already the ones you mentioned are already mentioned or already handled by the existing infrastructure, if you will.
Yes.
Kind of. Yeah.
Exactly. Kind of. Because in other countries, the mechanical societies represent all usage. Got it.
Okay. All right. So the 2018, this law, this act is put into place. And then out of that, you said the MLC, the Mechanical Licensing Collective is born. And it like, what was that process like? I mean, it probably didn't all just fall together on day one. You had to build some infrastructure to do this, right?
Yeah, it was not easy. The MLC, the mechanical, the MMA, the Music Modernization Act. Yeah, we all do this. The Music Modernization Act passed and was signed into law in October of 2018. And the act called for the MLC to be created, and then for the blanket license that the MLC would administer to go into effect on January 1st, 2021.
Okay, so you had you built in some, or they built in some time for you.
Right. So the law built in some time, which at the time made sense, but then there was a process for determining who would be the MLC, because there were different organizations vying to become the MLC. They were all presenting their expertise, their skills, their resources, and sort of there was an industry-wide basically campaign by different groups of individuals that wanted to become the Mechanical Licensing Collective. So although the Mechanical Licensing Collective is referenced in the MMA, it is a concept. It's not actually an agency of
it didn't define who, it defined a what. Exactly.
It defined a what. It's not like it's the United States Postal Service where that is a
it's different
of a government. So it defines the Mechanical Licensing Collective in lowercase. So it's really a concept. It's all in lowercase, it's not a title. There's various companies who were vying to be the MLC. Well, actually, were vying to be the Mechanical Licensing Collective, but they had different names. One of those names was this company, the Mechanical Licensing Collective, that just had the same name of the concept. Ultimately, the industry selected, the Copyright Office designated us, the Mechanical Licensing Collective, as that organization that would effectively administer the blanket license. So that was the first step. That happened in 2019. So in 2019, an organization was finally designated. Okay, this organization in the summer of 2019. Now this organization had to, have a board, have committees, and there was an industry-wide process for people, nominating or raising their hand to be members of the committees. The board was already pretty much put together by the group that was pitching to be the MLC, but there was still no executive team.
Got it.
In 2019, the first employee, our CEO, Chris Outtro, was hired in January of 2020.
Oh, wow. So now that's not a lot of runway to get from January of 2020 to launch in January of 21.
So in January 2020, you think, okay, you have 1 year to hire an executive team and to build an office and build an infrastructure and hire a staff and create policies and build infrastructure. Now we had already had 2 consultants who eventually became a part of the executive team as well.
Sure.
That were working to help with the technology and the conversations with publishers leading up to the hiring of the first full-time employee. But ultimately, the executive team, we came together in the first quarter of 2020. Now, what else happened in the first quarter of 2020? That's when the pandemic.
There was a little bit of global news that happened.
Global pandemic, which basically meant that we're creating this all-star team of music rights and technology executives to build this organization in less than a year, and then we were hit with the realities of the pandemic, which was everyone had to social. Remember, we had all social distance.
Of course,
in the same room. Some cities were more strict than others, and ultimately, we spent the entire first year, year zero, if you will, 2020. Still with the mandate to build the MLC. Nothing changed about the mandate. We still had to build the MLC and still had the license had to go into effect January 1st, 2021. So we hired staff. We, conceptualized policies and procedures and interviewed people and trained people and built software and handled massive amounts of data, all remotely. And so we became basically the world's first completely remote cloud-based music rights organization.
In less than a year. Yeah.
In less than a year. And we didn't see each other for the first time until I didn't see my colleagues until mid 2021.
Yeah. And I'll also add to this that the MLC is a
actually 2022, so almost 2 years.
2 years. The MLC is a nonprofit, which also comes with very interesting restrictions and just sort of paths that one must walk to get the corporate infrastructure in place. And you got to do all that in less than a year, too, in addition to building effectively a tech startup.
Exactly. I love that you use tech startup because that's how I described us in the beginning. From the tech startup world. I always said I like to reference MLC as a tech startup with a very clear mandate and generally decent funding for a tech startup.
Fair. Yeah. Two things that a clear mandate and decent funding are two things that many tech startups don't start up with. Yeah, right.
Yes, exactly. But yeah, it was very challenging. Like I said, I didn't see my co-founders, coworkers until mid 2022, and we had an office built. I remember us watching via Zoom. This office that was in the works, but no one could work there until later. It took a lot of work to stand it up, but we did it. We hit all of our goals and all of our both mandated deadlines and self-imposed deadlines.
Yep.
We have done a lot since then. But January 1st, 2021 is when we went into full operations, and the entirety of 2020 was pretty much the worst part of the pandemic, and we had to still deliver.
Yeah. In a sense, not the worst time to be a tech startup because technology is what we all had to leverage during the pandemic, whether we were technically inclined or not, right? Like, everybody got good at Zoom, and working remotely and all that stuff. So now you had started some tech startups before this, so you had a little bit of experience with probably collaborating remotely and some of that. Is that right?
No, absolutely. I mean, my this entire project, if you will, the MLC being a experiment on music rights administration, I'd actually been a part of this process prior to the MLC existing.
Got it.
Going back many years. I've been a member, I wore multiple hats that kind of all came together in a way that led me to my role at the MLC. And I can go far back as when I was a musician myself. So I was an artist.
Oh, okay.
And that's what
instrument?
I was a singer.
Yeah. Okay. Great.
And so I was an artist. That's what got me into the music industry in the first place. But eventually I pivoted in my 20s and started representing artists. For a period of time, I had a job as a head of marketing of a retail chain, but I was also the creator and general manager of the music division. And through that, I dealt with a number of labels and publishers and built a number of initiatives around supporting independent artists in our communities where we had stores. So already back then, I'd already been pro independent artist.
Sure.
As an artist, and then as a representative. Outside of my day job, I moonlit as a CEO of an artist management, boutique artist management company, which I had started my senior year of college at UCLA.
And what was the name of that?
It was called Renaissance Artist Management.
Oh, nice. Okay. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. So RAM artist for short. And I started with managing DJs in college because I used to be a club promoter. And, but then I started managing producers because some of those DJs were producers. And then I started managing songwriters, and it kind of evolved from there.
Sure.
To me managing live acts, songwriters, rappers, singers, so forth. And expanding my boutique agency to bring on other managers in different cities. So we were representing talent across the United States at that point. So, and from 2008 to 2012, that 4-year period, I was the head of marketing and music of a $500 million youth-driven retail chain based out of the West Coast.
Got it.
And this is a job I got right out of college.
Perfect.
And within that role, I developed our entire music division. That included dealing with Universal Music distribution and getting CDs in our stores that we sold at the countertop, at the checkout counter.
Yep.
Music videos playing on TVs throughout the store. Artists doing store appearances and autograph, us sponsoring tours, producing concerts in the malls.
Wow.
We were in 150 shopping malls across the U.S., so I oversaw that.
Amazing.
But I also moonlit as a manager, and then I started a record label and a publishing company. So in my early 20s, because the company was called Loft 24 Records and Loft 24 Publishing. The reason why they're called Loft 24 Records and Loft 24 Publishing because I was 24 years old and I lived in a loft in downtown LA.
Hey, you got to come up with a name somewhere. Yeah.
So at 24 years old, and for any early 20-somethings listening to this, you listen to me clearly. I was 24 years old, and I got zero money from parents, zero money from family. This was all bootstrapped. And hard work and driven by passion. Absolutely loved it. Every artist on my roster, I loved. Even though I was burning through money on music videos and tours and choreographers and backup dancers and merch and CDs and mixtapes, I loved every second of it.
I was going to say, just hearing you talk about this, it's obvious that the entrepreneurial spirit is something that is just deep within you because you keep talking about these side hustles like, oh yeah, well then I did this and I did this.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I love it. I'm here for it. Yeah.
I've done a lot more side hustles than that as well, but to get through college, I have 3 college degrees. I pay for all of them myself.
Oh,
I come from a very, and there's lots of musicians that listen to this. I come from a working class family, single mother, 4 kids. My mother's only 19 years older than me, so she's like a sister.
Sure.
My family was poor when I left Ohio. I moved to Los Angeles. I was 18 years old. I was homeless and I was unemployed. That was December 4th, 2003. And I moved to Los Angeles to become a musician with the little bit of money I have, $400, a CRT computer tower, a duffel bag of clothes, and a mission. And that's how I started my life in Los Angeles. My very first time on an airplane was a one-way ticket to Los Angeles that I bought on Craigslist. It was a Southwest Airlines Rapid Rewards, a companion coupon.
Yeah.
And that's how I got to Los Angeles, Burbank Airport, at midday, December 4th, 2003. I was 18.
That's like you're giving me chills. I love this. Yeah.
This is how I started and ever since then, I've been aggressively ambitious is a phrase I like to use. Aggressively ambitious, not simply ambitious. Ambitious leaves room for failure or the opportunity to give up. Aggressively ambitious means that you're not going to give up and you're gonna do everything you can do until you have nothing left to give.
I like your phrase better than the one I use about me, which is I'm too dumb to quit. But, aggressively ambitious.
Aggressively ambitious is much more
it's much more positive. Yes. and both basically mean the same thing. That's right. Yeah.
Mean the same thing. Absolutely.
Go ahead. Yeah, you're good.
Okay. So December 4th, 2003. I celebrate this date every year, by the way. It's been it'll be 22 years, but I celebrate it every year because, as a matter of fact, it's tattooed right here on my bicep.
Oh, wow.
December 4th, 2003.
In Roman numerals. I love this.
This was the most important date. This is the second most important date in my life. The first more important date was the day I was born. And the second most important date was the day I chose to live. And by my own terms.
On your own terms. Absolutely. Yeah.
And I came out here and it's at Los Angeles to be an aspiring artist. Now back then, as you know, Dave, there was no social media. There was no messaging someone on Facebook or LinkedIn to try to get your foot in the door. But with at 18 years old, I still got a job as the executive assistant to a Grammy Award-winning music video producer with no experience in Hollywood. And I still use my skills and to do that. So that kind of sets the tone of my character.
For sure. Yes.
From 20, and that is the consistent perseverance and aggressive ambition is the consistent theme throughout the 22 years of my career so far. Starting with nothing and trying to build not only climb the ladder, but build the ladder as I'm climbing has been the theme. So by skip ahead to 24 years old, I was 18 when I got here, 24 when I was running 3 businesses and being the head of marketing and music of a retail chain. So you go from being a poor, homeless kid, and then 6 years later, you're the VP of marketing of a $500 million retail chain, developing its music division and running 3 companies from a loft in downtown LA.
Heck yeah.
That is what the ambition created in 6 years with zero financial support from anyone. I worked full time and went to school night and weekends for my first degree. My second degree, I was at UCLA. My first degree was at Los Angeles Valley College. My second degree was at UCLA. My third degree, master's, was at CSUN. And it was in my master's that I pivoted to music rights administration, which led me to this leg of my world.
Yeah.
So what led me to the MLC was I started. There was a time where I owned my first tech startup, which was an in-store music video network called Maven Promo, and this was a cloud-based music video network that played music videos in retail stores for teenagers. So think about Hot Topic, where you go into Hot Topic and you see rock videos. I used to do this in the hip hop world. So these were sort of urban streetwear hip hop chains where you have your Nikes and your brand new, basketball players would come and sign autographs, and rappers from Def Jam would come do autographs. This was the hip hop version of Hot Topic. They had 100+ stores. I used to be the head of marketing. I left. And I started my in-store music service. And I did a deal with a couple of different brands, MySpace. I created a show called MySpace Presents. I did a deal with DJ Ski, thanks to Mark Cuban. Thanks to Mark Cuban, who made the introduction. This was a countdown show similar to TRL so it was a countdown show of music videos, but between each video, we promoted sneakers from Converse and Adidas and so forth. So that was my first business. And at the time, I was licensing music videos from the labels and we're dealing with labels and all the societies, ASCAP, UMIC, SEC.
Sure.
So I was dealing with the licensing, but I also owned my own label, and I would put my own music videos on the platform. I also owned the publishing company. Therefore, I was able to register works. And that's when I started to see the gaps. Because I owned the network that was the music user, but I also owned the content as the label and the publisher. And I would see that I know that my videos that I owned played in this network that I reported back to societies because I had to report. But I also know that I wasn't getting paid as the copyright owner, even though I owned the copyright. So there was some gap, and I didn't understand the gap. Why is there a gap between me owning the network and not getting paid for my content on the network, even though I'm paying the licensing fees as the network?
You should be getting at least a portion of what you're paying.
I didn't really understand how it worked. So eventually I decided I want to dive deeper into this world. I want to understand how this works. And I started doing individual research, and eventually I decided to go back to grad school, and California State University in Northridge had just started their first year in a new master's program called Music Industry Administration. It was I was thinking of going to law school actually, and doing a joint JD MBA program that I've been interested in since I was an undergrad. UCLA and Berkeley had a joint MBA JD program because I liked music law and I liked business. I wanted to do that. But then CSUN said, hey, we have this new program called Music Industry Administration, and it's a combination between our business school, our music school, and our law school.
Oh, perfect.
So you take one quarter, you're taking entertainment law, and next year you're taking managerial accounting, another quarter you're taking publishing, the next day you're taking business contracts, you're taking marketing and music industry, you're taking entrepreneurship in the business school, the MBA school. So you're taking all these different courses across 3 different schools. And it bundles up into this brand new first of its kind master's program in the United States. And they were only within their first cohort of students. I was their second cohort. They're now in their 16th cohort.
Oh, amazing.
So I decided, I had actually got laid off at the time because the company that I was working for acquired another company and they had to lay some people off, but it was perfect timing. I got laid off. I was working on my startups. I had my in-store music video network. I had decided to close my label, my publisher, and sell back the masters to all the artists for $1 each. And I kept the publishing because I would need the publishing as I continued to experiment on building technology solutions around publishing. So that led me to get into the master's program, and I took a class by Steve Winograd, who I call the grandfather of publishing. He wrote the book The Complete Guide to Music Publishing.
Got it.
And I took his class, and that class opened my eyes to these issues in the music industry, the music publishing sector. And I did my own independent research outside of my master's program on what's called the black box, which are unclaimed royalties. Now, I already had an interest in that because I was dealing with that as an entrepreneur.
Yeah, right.
I'm paying royalties into a system, but I'm not getting paid royalties out as a copyright owner. What is the issue? So I started, effectively, I got a master's degree in music industry administration with a focus on copyright administration and music publishing, and did individual research on the global black box issue, starting to understand all the various issues from metadata to technology to licensing to policy to regulatory. All of that work became research that I put out. That research led me to build a platform called Royalty Claim. And eventually the United States government came to me and said, hey, we saw your research on this issue. We're actually doing an economic analysis of this bill. And the United States Congressional Budget Office approached me and asked me to advise them on this bill.
Amazing.
That bill would become the Music Modernization Act. And my advisement was based on my research in grad school, which was driven by all this stuff was all kind of snowballed. Eventually, in 2019, the Copyright Office invited me to come to DC. Say, oh, we saw your advisement with the U.S. Congressional Budget Office. We'd like you to also join our unclaimed royalty research symposium as we start to understand black box royalties and the impact of the Music Modernization Act. So I came into DC on December 4th, 2019.
Amazing.
Which was, of course, me celebrating my December 3rd. Every year I celebrate December 3rd. So December 4th, which was exactly 16 years after I took the leap of faith and came to Los Angeles by myself, I'm being invited to DC to talk to U.S. government, basically, and then advise the government how the MLC wants to come about, how it should go about doing global outreach and partnerships. And then a few months later in 2020, I was headhunted and asked to come lead that department.
Sure.
So that's how it all snowballed. Now, during that time, there's other things I did. Like I built a company called Tune Registry, which was the world's first technology platform that enabled songwriters to be their own publisher. And it is through that experience that I now head up all of our data programs and tech partnerships around startups. So it all comes together.
This is, I mean, I always say, well, I say a lot of things, and I didn't come up with this phrase, but I love it. Overnight success takes 20 years, right? And you just described a version of why that statement is true, right?
It is true. And I have a LinkedIn post that literally says overnight success in 20, I think 20 or 25 years, but I wrote a whole piece giving this background I just gave, but in more detail and photos.
Yeah.
25 years of overnight success.
And it's true, right? But like I like to think that any of us who have had some version of success, and I love to quote Steve Jobs, who said it's so much easier to connect the dots looking backwards. But when we do look backwards, which is not something I recommend people spend a lot of time doing, but we're humans, so we wind up doing it occasionally anyway. sometimes it's easy to point to a moment or several moments where it's like, man, like I didn't realize it on that day, but if I hadn't done that, I have no idea where I would be today. Like none of the things that I currently do or have done and have had success with would ever have even existed, or at least I wouldn't have been part of it.
And there's many moments like that throughout your journey, because your journey is not linear. We have ups and downs, and we have pivots. I've had many ups and downs. I know I told my story, and it sounds very linear, but there were massive failures. There were setbacks. I've lost businesses. I've had to sue people.
Same.
I've had a year of depression. So I've had all of those things are part of the journey. And when you're in those moments, both the good moments and the dark moments, you don't have any foresight of what's coming in the future.
No.
It doesn't even mean next. Some things are seeds that are planted that don't blossom until years later. Like that happened when I sold my first startup. I sold my first startup to, and my first startup I sold to Ghazi, who owns Empire.
Okay.
And I sold my in-store music video network to Empire, which is now one of the partners at MLC on the platform that I built called The Dirt. But and there's lots of those type of kind of loops that happen where you think about moments or interactions that you have at one point, and then in the future, how those come back around, how those relationships come back around. And there's a saying I used to have when I was in Hollywood, when I used to be a club promoter, and I dealt with lots of sketchy club promoters in the Hollywood scene. I would say, I had some sketchy business partners, but I never burned a bridge, because you never know if you're gonna need that bridge again. So you never burn a bridge, and you try to maintain your integrity in everything you do. But hindsight is 2020, like you mentioned. Hindsight is 2020. I can tell these stories in a linear way now because I know the pivotal moments that contributed to where I am today. In those moments, there's no way you would have known.
You don't get to know.
Contribute to those,
No, and that's the thing, and I agree with you about never burning a bridge, and that is also something I live by. The lawsuits sometimes wind up lighting a bridge or two on fire, but no one gets into a lawsuit for fun. It's you do it because it's necessary, and it is.
There's some bridges that are going to shatter, but
yes.
But you want most of your bridges to stay in.
Yeah, because you never know when you're going to find yourself at that bridge again. Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Or on the other side of that bridge, because I am now on the other side of the bridge for some people that were on the better side of the bridge before.
Yeah.
I don't bring. You don't necessarily act on everything you remember, but you remember.
Right. You definitely remember. Yeah. And it's very that context, that awareness, that self-awareness of remembering what it was like to not be the one in your position, but to be the one in your client or customer's position. That allows for an empathy that is deeper than anything you could have without that. And that allows for great customer service, which is the key. Yeah.
Absolutely. And that is one of, going back to MLC, in my role at MLC, I interact with hundreds of tech startup founders. Excuse me. I interact with hundreds of them. In my role, I oversee our data programs, and we have over 500 companies around the world that have access to the MLC's data. I have conversations, I have one-on-ones, I have Zoom meetings with various CEOs and teams. And I bring that sense of empathy because I used to be on their side of the screen. I used to be the one trying to engage with a music institution that may not have understood what I was working on, may not have had the resources internally to engage a relationship, even if they wanted to, or just simply weren't truly interested, just sort of interested. I try to bring a level of empathy. And there's lots of startup founders who I've dealt with who can speak to this. Yeah. They can call me. They can set up a meeting with me and talk about whatever you're working on. How can the MLC support you? How does our data support your mission and your products and your services, and to support songwriters and music creators and rights holders? And I love that. I'm super passionate about it. I developed and taught a class on this at UCLA for years.
Yeah.
On music tech startups. It was the first time there was a class at UCLA on music tech startups. So I was the one to build it. I went to UCLA. I fought my way into UCLA. I wasn't accepted as a freshman. That didn't stop me. I went to community college and I graduated with honors and transferred into UCLA with honors and finished, my bachelor's degree at UCLA. And many years later, went back and developed the first course. And
aggressively ambitious.
Aggressively ambitious. There wasn't even a music industry program when I went to UCLA. And now we have a bachelor's degree. There's lots of these stories, themes throughout my journey where there's academic themes, there's entrepreneurial themes, there's policy and advocacy themes. For example, I spent some time as on the advocacy committee of the Grammys LA chapter, and that allowed me to meet with Adam Schiff, Congressman Adam Schiff, to promote the legislation that.
I was going to say, wasn't he one of the ones that spearheaded the MMA legislation?
Yes, exactly. So I was able to be a part of the I Respect Music campaign and got to go and so his office is in Burbank and help promote the Recording Academy LA chapters, campaigning for recording artists. And that was even before I went to DC or talked to the U.S. Congressional Office. So there was a lot of advocacy in my world, not as a lobbyist or a politician, but really just about someone who understood.
Someone who's in the world.
Yeah, who understood, trying to respect music creators. I'm a copyright purist, so that, understanding how copyright works and trying to. It's funny because I'm a copyright purist, but I'm also a technologist. So that blend is interesting because technologists tend to step on the toes of copyright owners
all the time.
And that's what led me to develop a course at UCLA on this. My course wasn't for musicians; it was for computer science majors to learn about music business, so that when they go build the next, digital music service, they had respect for artists. And I've had a lot of former students who went out and built startups or joined startups, and they say they mention, "Oh my God, I know about performance royalties already because of your class." And there's lots of tech founders that don't know anything about music licensing. They still built the businesses. I used to advise a number of founders and accelerator programs before I built the class at UCLA, and that's what spearheaded. That's what sparked me to build the class, because I was advising young founders who were at various accelerators across the United States, from universities like MIT, Martin Trust Center for Entrepreneurship, USC Startup Garage, University of Michigan, Berkeley, and then also, Techstars Music and Mucker Lab and all these different startup environments. I was a mentor through South by Southwest Music, and I would meet these young founders, and some of them were my age. I was in my early 30s. And they were working on these really cool apps. I had a company called ENT Ventures, which was a consultancy for digital media tech startups. And I would get a little piece of angel equity in some of these startups because I really liked them. And once I met with the founders, I said, "Okay, well, show me your pitch deck and show me your financial models." And none of these financial models would include licensing costs, and it's just a lot of gaps because they didn't have the understanding of the music business. And a lot of them thought the artists should give them the music for free. Oh, it's promotion. They should give me the music for free because we're going to give them promotion. And I said, you know what? There needs to be a class. There needs to be a class on music industry entrepreneurship, but the class needs to be designed for business majors and computer science majors and I had a mathematics major. She went on to she went on to work at TikTok. And became a machine. She's now developing AI. She's getting her master's degree. She's gotten already. But a lot of students like that, former students, have gone on to work at Apple, have gone on to work at various companies. And they told me that your class really, put me on the path to what I'm doing now, because it was a very practical class. I brought in lots of startup founders.
So that's amazing. Absolutely. No, this is I love this path, this story, your story, and I love that the MLC exists to do all this. I know we're running short on the time you have allotted for us today. If you have, do you have a minute for one more question? So, yeah, yeah, it's a great conversation. I totally agree. In your speaking to your role at the MLC today, but it's kind of spilling outside of that because it seems like everything you do spills outside of that. I feel like by 3 in the afternoon you've created another tech startup and founded an LLC and you're off to the races.
So there's many things that I love about the MLC and my role at the MLC. There's many things I love. First of all, I just celebrated my 5-year anniversary of joining the MLC, but it really goes back to, so I talked about really my background, but how does my background affect what I do at the MLC? Our CEO is Chris Alren, and I met Chris in early 2020 when we began to talk about the possibility of me joining the MLC.
Sure.
And originally, there were a set of roles that the board and he had sort of thought about in terms of organizing the leadership of the MLC. And originally, I was asked to, I was interviewing for a role that eventually didn't exist anymore, but I was interviewing for a role, and it was, I think, Chief Operating Officer of the MLC. Okay. That was the role at the time that I was interviewing for via this executive recruiting firm. And then later on, I didn't get a call back, and then I got an email either from Chris directors or someone representing Chris, and he reached out and said, "Hey, this isn't really the role for you. I have a different role for you." And they sent me over the job description, and it was the most vague title I've heard in my life: Head of Third-Party Partnerships. But I started reading the job description, and I got chills. The job description was exactly a fit for what I had been doing for my entire career. My interest in technology, my passion for supporting music creators, my skill for problem solving music industry issues, my interest in a sort of a interdisciplinary type of role. And so when we finally met and started talking about this role, he said, "I want to be honest, I created this role because I had already followed you. I've been in the room when you've spoken on panels. I've followed your blog, because I write a blog. I've been writing a blog since 2014.
Congrats, that's great.
This blog has been, like that. This blog is how the U.S. Congressional Budget Office reached out to me, basically.
Sure.
And I followed your work, and I can see that you've been touching on all these different areas of the music industry from the lens of empowering independent music creators, and from the skill set of blending technical strategy and problem solving with these issues around royalties and so forth.
Yeah.
So I created this role for you. It wasn't like I went and just found a role on a career website and just replied to it. This was it was almost like my bio was the job description. It was so befitting for me that I wanted for sure to take this job. The chief operating officer job I wasn't super excited about, to be honest.
Sure.
I just spent several years as a serial entrepreneur, as a CEO of several tech startups. The idea of being the co-pilot was not top of mind.
Not your thing, right? Yeah.
I did want to work with MLC. So this role was the best. I think it's probably the best role I've ever had in a full-time. Yeah,
right. In a working for someone else.
Right, working for someone else.
Yeah.
Job, exactly.
Yeah.
And I've been here for 5 years, and I've done a lot. I've built the DERP, the Distributor Unmatched Recordings Portal, which is the world's first platform that enables independent music distributors to have access to publishing mechanical data. We've been able to find and track down independent artists and pay them out millions of dollars in royalties that they probably would not have been able to receive before. We have over 116 distributors that use this platform that I've manage.
Yep.
And this is because the role that I have at MLC allows me to lean into my creativity and my passions, but within the framework of our mission as an organization. And our mission is aligned with my career mission.
Clearly, yes. Yeah, I mean, it's purpose built for you.
So super exciting for me. I ended up getting an award last year at the Music Business Association called the Busy Awards, a maestro of metadata.
Nice. Nice. I like that.
It was due to this. In 2019, I also got recognized in Billboard's Digital Power Players for building my other startup, Tune Registry and Royalty Claim. So I've been building technical solutions in the metadata space for years.
Obviously, yeah.
Pre-MLC and now at the MLC, I built another initiative called Radar, which helps us identify and track down songwriters across Latin America. So
I have one perhaps final question for you, which is, what is the most common either mistake you see artists making or piece of advice that you wind up giving to artists in your role here at the MLC and anything that sort of spills around that?
Yeah, so I mean, it's the same mistakes that I saw pre-MLC.
Okay, right. I kind of figured this might all tie together.
So,
yeah.
And I have meetings with artists all the time. I just had a meeting with the artist today.
Sure.
I do lots of one-on-one meetings, even though I'm quote unquote high up and an executive. I do lots of one-on-one meetings with artists every single week. Artists request meetings with me if they come through our DERP initiative. Sure. And I have conversations with these artists, and the mistakes they make are the same. There's a couple of mistakes. One is sometimes artists sign up for services that they're not fully aware of what they're signing up for. For example, there are a lot more music distributors today that offer publishing administration than there were in the past, than there were before the MLC existed 5 years ago.
Sure.
I know that because I work with and encourage lots of music distributors to develop publishing administration businesses. But sometimes artists are not fully aware that they're signing up for the publishing administration business. And it's important, and it doesn't mean it's a bad thing in general, but it's important they understand what they're signing up for. So
right.
That's a mistake that some artists make. And then the other thing that some artists make is sometimes they don't think that they have enough royalties to substantiate doing the work to collect their royalties. So they wait until they have a publishing deal. In the meantime, their royalties are accruing at the MLC. And for example, last year there was an artist that I finally was able to reel in. His first payment, we paid him $125,000 in mechanical royalties, and that's just for the country of the United States.
Wow!
That was just for one country, and he has since been paid out almost $200,000 since we brought him on last year. And this is one artist who was a bedroom producer and he was getting married last year. Actually, there's two artists that we brought on. They're both getting married last year, and we were able to pay them out to collectively over $150,000 in back royalties. And and there's lots more stories like that. I love these stories.
Yeah.
We go out and we find artists across the United States, some artists outside the United States. And I do one-on-one Zoom meetings with them. I take screenshots sometimes. I love seeing their face when I tell them that they have money. But
that's great. I like.
You know the
punchline is coming. Yeah.
Yeah, I know it's coming, and you get all type of responses. I've had people cry. I've had people fall out of their chair in their home studio. I've had all kinds of things.
I love that.
The MLC. One thing to take away is that the MLC, our job is to find rights holders, music creators, and to pay them out the royalties that they are due. Now we have royalties that go back 18 years to 2007.
Oh, so this gets to go back. It doesn't just start in 21. Oh,
exactly. So when we talk to some people, I've been releasing since 2010, 2015. Like, yeah, we have that. I can see.
We got you. Yeah.
We got you. So that's the surprise that a lot of people get, is that they don't realize that we have a pool of royalties that we call historical unmatched royalties. And we have a dashboard on our website. You can go and look at it. You can actually see how much royalties it is, what DSPs it came from,
Yeah.
what months, all granularly, what months it covered going back to 2007, what the amount is, how much we paid out so far. Amazing. So we've paid out over $3 billion in royalties since April 2021. And we've paid out thousands of songwriters who probably would not have ever gotten paid, to be honest, in that 5-year period. I say that because I had been working with musical artists for 10 years before my role at MLC.
Yeah, right.
For 10 years, I had been representing songwriters, and many of them had not even been paid for the 10 years before I represented them. So, in 5 years, we've paid out $3 billion in royalties. And a lot of that is going to artists who would not have ever received it before because there was no organization. So I think one of the mistakes I see is that some artists sometimes want to wait until they have a publishing deal to take their publishing seriously. And you need to do it now. There's different benefits for doing it now. Not only the financial benefit of getting paid now, and we pay out on a monthly basis, so that cash flow is nice. We're paying people's rent. I have several artists that are a part of this initiative that I created called DERP. So they're what I call my DERP artists. I follow up with them every once in a while, check in and see what was your payment this month. We're paying your rent. We're paying you $4,000 or $5,000 a month. That's rent, that's car, that's bills, that's gas, that's groceries, and you can focus on touring, you can focus on merch, you can focus on other.
I mean that like lets you have a career. Yes.
Yeah, it's your baseline. Your expenses are covered, so now you can focus on your performing live and making money that way, or selling merch, making money that way. But
right.
You're not worried that you can't pay your mortgage this month, or because you're waiting 8 months for a royalty check from someone else. We're paying on a monthly basis, direct deposit right into your bank account. So it's really changed the lives and livelihood of so many working musicians who are getting paid almost. You're getting paid consistently. You're not waiting 6, 7, 9 months.
Yeah, right, right.
And that's important.
Amazing. I know we could keep talking for forever because there's so many more facets of the MLC and also of your history to sort of unpack and enjoy sort of digging into together. But I also think that's a perfect spot to wrap this. That's a nice little button to put on the end of this. Like, what an amazing thing that these artists get to be artists as their career. Like, I know I said it at the beginning, this show is by, for, and about working musicians. And working implies that at least at some point you're going to get paid, and this is it. I love this. I love it. I love it. Yeah. Thank you, Dae, for taking your time today with us.
Thanks for having me.
Amazing. Absolutely. Yeah, no, this is absolutely been my pleasure. There's some times I know where things might go with a guest. I'm usually wrong about that too. And then other times where I have no idea where it's going to go with a guest, which was kind of coming into today. And it's these that I love the most because what an amazing story, what an amazing journey. And thank you for sharing it with us. And thank you for doing what you're doing at the MLC because that, again, you're empowering artists in a very specific, material, impactful way. And I love that. So
absolutely. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. There are 3 words we like to say on this show, Dae, and I'm certainly fine saying them, but if you would say these words, it would be my honor.
Always be performing.
That's it. Thank you very much for joining us today. Thank the either lawnmower or weed whacker that's outside your door for joining us today too. That was occasionally present, and I love that. It's very real. Folks, thanks so much for listening. You can check out themlc.com. Of course, we'll put links in the show notes, and of course, giggabpodcast.com as well. Dae, again, thank you. Love it. And folks, we'll see you next week.